Welcome to the Order Sons and Daughters of Italy and America live Facebook series, episode 5 of season 3. We are bringing back a fabulous guest host that we had from season 2. She's a best-selling novelist, Adriana Trigiani, which I'm sure a lot of viewers know is simply Adriana. And Adriana, before I let you introduce our special guest tonight, I have a test for you, because last time when I came to you and I said, take over, Adriana, you said, the pressure is on, Miles. And I was like, oh, that's a good opening line. That's a good first line. That hooked me, right? Authors are known for their first lines, right? The clock struck 13. So now I'm going to go around. I'm going to introduce the others. And then I want to hear an excellent first line. That's the test. All right. We have with us Bob Bianchi, Order Sons and Daughters of Italy and America, National First Vice President, and our moderator, Managing Director of the National Office, Order Sons and Daughter of Italy and America. And I am Miles Ryan Fisher, the Editor-in-Chief of Italian America Magazine. And now for Adriana, guest hosting episode 5.
Fantastic. Well, I'm thrilled to be back, obviously. I'm surrounded by handsome men. This looks a little bit like an ad for a soap opera. It's great, with me being the one that gets killed. But that said, I would like to introduce Mr. David Baldacci, who is my honorary brother. I adore him. He is the #1 global, and I really want you to hear this number because it'll blow your head off. #1 best-selling author globally. He has 150 million copies of his book sold worldwide, which means like everybody walking on the planet has read David Baldacci, essentially. He is now in more than 80 countries, okay? 45 languages his work has been translated into, and consistently, year after year, he puts out books of the highest possible quality. He also ventured into other genres for kids. Everybody, Wish You Well is a novel of his that is read in Virginia classrooms, which thrills me because it's about the mountains of Southwest Virginia and a family story. He has the Wish You Well Foundation, which he runs with his wife, Michelle, who is a powerhouse and my honorary sister. I adore her. He still lives in Virginia. He's a native of Virginia. And I also want to mention that, you know this, but his books have been adapted into feature films that are incredible. And with no further ado, I want to say one more thing. You must, if you're a member of the Masterclass site, you must see his Masterclass, because I've watched it more than once, because it just settles me down and helps me focus on my goals. And you don't necessarily have to want to be a writer to listen to it, but if you want to be, it certainly is the primer on how to do it. With no further ado, David Baldacci. I can't do my left and right, sorry.
Thank you.
Welcome, David.
It's terrific to be here. Thank you very much. Always enjoy hanging out with you.
It's always fun. It's always fun. So, all right, so why don't we jump in and ask the first most important question, because a lot of folks haven't met David here. And we know about your Italian heritage. My favorite story about your Italian heritage is when you took your family to Italy. And when you got to your town, what happened? Can you tell us the story of that?
Yeah, my grandfather came from a little town called Barga. It's in Tuscany. It's in the mountains. It's great skiing up there. And he immigrated to the US when he was young, and eventually moved to Richmond, where he settled down, met my grandmother, and they had 8 kids, including my father. And my dad always wanted to go to Barga to see where his father grew up. His dad died early, unfortunately died in 1940. I never had an opportunity to meet him. He was a tall, Rudolph Valentino looking sort of guy, 6'4", just really handsome. He ran a bunch of businesses in Richmond, including a hotel, and very dynamic person from all accounts. And I'm terribly sorry I never got a chance to meet him. My dad never got a chance to go to Barga. The closest he got, I tell people, he was in Egypt. And the United States Navy said, nope, you can't go and visit Barga. We're fighting a war. So he never got a chance to go to Barga. So then my dad passed away in 2008. And I told myself, look, I'm gonna go to Barga for me and for my dad. And I took my family. And so we made arrangements to go. And about maybe 3 or 4 weeks before we were going to leave, I got an email from the mayor of Barga. And he said, hey, you know, I read somewhere you were going to spend your vacation in Italy. I would love for you to come by Barga. We'd go to lunch, show you where your grandfather grew up. That was just great. You know, we were going to come by anyway. So we made the arrangements. We went to Italy. We were staying in a villa a few hours away. We went over with a couple other families with small kids. Our kids were pretty young back then. And the day came for us to go. We got into the cars, and we had the, you know, in the United States, they call the GPS system, you know, Hertz Never Lost. In Italy, it's slightly different name. It's called Hertz Always Lost. So, you know, I've never driven in Europe where the GPS system actually stayed on long enough for me to get where I was supposed to go. So about an hour out of Barga, it just died. You know, we were like, my poor wife, she's like using paper maps, trying to navigate. And I was a trial lawyer. And one thing that's beaten into your head is that you were never late. Judges don't like it when you're late. So I'm very punctual. I like to be early. And we were late, and I was getting upset. So finally we get to this crossroad, to this place. It looked like a town. And I looked at my wife and said, do you think we're here? Do you think this is Barga? And she looked out the window and said, well, considering there's a 14-foot tall poster of you on the wall over there, it's a pretty good bet this is Barga. And we noticed all the people and policemen directing traffic. And so I rolled down my window. I got the attention of one of the officers. He came over in my broken Italian and his broken English. I said, can you tell me what's going on? What's here? He goes, oh, it's David Baldacci Day in Barga. Park over there. So I rolled my window up. I looked over at my wife, and Adrienne knows my wife really well. She gave me the Michelle look, and she's like, David Baldacci Day, are you freaking kidding me? And I said, honey, I knew nothing about this. She goes, you're lying. So we get out. Everybody knows that we're there. And Barga is a walled city like Lucca. So the huge gates open. And inside Barga is old Barga, dates from like the 11th century. Outside of Barga is New Barga, dates from like the 16th century. The gates open, and out comes the mayor of Barga. He's wrapped up in an Italian flag and an American flag. Behind him is a marching band. Behind the marching band are reporters and videographers, and behind them are everybody who lives in Barga. They flew the American flag for the first time over the town since World War II, when the Americans liberated it. So we're laughing, we're hugging and all that. And he takes me into the town. We go through the town, we go to the Duomo, we go to the government building. I do a book signing at a bookshop. We meet all these people. We're everywhere, all over the place. Then we have this lunch. It's me, the mayor, my family, the friends we traveled with, 1,100 new friends from Barga. And we had this fabulous lunch. We had like 9 gallons of, gelato. And it was getting late, and we were staying in a villa that was on the side of a mountain that you reach by a road like this wide, and there was no guardrail. So, you know, if you missed a little bit, you're dead. And I didn't want to drive up there at night, and my wife didn't want me to either. And she said, okay, you know, this has been great. Tell the mayor, lovely time, we're out of here. So I went over to the mayor and I said, this has been fantastic. I said, unbelievable. One of the most memorable days of my life. Thank you. And he just cut me off. He goes, and now it is time for you to give your grand speech in the central courtyard of the city. So I was like, okay, I'm wearing a polo shirt and flip-flops. It's August. And so we marched to the grand courtyard, which is very grand. It really was. And the marching band plays one more song. And by the way, I didn't even know Italy had marching bands. Okay, I thought there was like NCAA football here that had marching bands. No, they have marching bands there. They play one more song, and the mayor gets up and starts giving us gifts. He gave me an oil painting by a local artist. He gave me a lifetime supply of locally pressed olive oil. And that was far more than 4 ounces to get back on the plane, to get back to the United States, let me tell you that. And they gave me a journal that my ancestor Pietro Baldacci started writing in like 1640. And because paper was scarce back then, if you died and there was still paper, you just handed it down. The last entry in that journal is from the 1880s, all Baldaccis, all people obviously I never knew even existed. They gave me a genealogical chart of the Baldacci family from the 11th century, when the name was spelled a little bit differently, all the way to my grandfather's generation, where I saw siblings of his I didn't even know existed because they never came to the United States. That just blew me away. I have it framed in my office. It's enormous. And then he said, okay, the Baldacci Bambinos, my son and daughter, come on up to get your stuff. So my daughter back then was like 14, 14-year-old girl. Anybody who has a 14-year-old girl, any dad, okay, so the gauntlet separates. She's walking through this huge crowd of people up to get her stuff. And she's not looking at the mayor. She's not looking at anybody, not looking at her mom. She's looking at her dad. And she's giving her dad the 14-year-old daughter look. And that look is kind of like, you've ruined my life. So she got her stuff. And my son, who's 12, this is the Mars Venus story. My son, who's 12, what does my son do? My son does this. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, I know. I'm very important. I know. I write the books, actually. Thank you very much for the gift. I deserve it. And he goes, sits back down. So that's the difference between guys and girls. And then at the end, I gave my speech. And I talked about, even though it was August, it felt like Christmas because it was like outpouring of family and gifts and warmth and all good things. And as we were leaving, a friend of mine who we traveled over there with, he said, you have to come and meet these gentlemen. They came here to see you. So he led me over to this bench, and on the bench were 4 elderly gentlemen. I found out the youngest was like 88, the oldest was like 102. They all had little, felt caps on, they had canes, they each had a copy of one of my books in Italian. They all stood up when I approached, they took off their cap and did sort of a little bow of respect. And I asked my friend, I said, this is great, who are they? He goes, these are all Baldacci. Some of them came from other countries today to meet you. So obviously being Italian, we all started hugging and crying and looking around for more food to eat and stuff like that. But it really was like one of the most memorable days. And I chronicled it in a travel story that I wrote for what's it called? The Planet something travel books. Anyway, Lonely Planet travel guide. So they asked me, do you have a travel story? And I said, yeah, I do. And I told them that one, and that's what I wrote. But so I entitled it, Going Home, even though I'd never been to Varga before, in every essential aspect and element, it felt like I was actually going home.
That's so beautiful and hilarious when you know your son. Colin is hilarious.
Oh yeah.
But it's also great, if you know your daughter Spencer, because she can do the death stare like her mom.
Yeah. Oh yes. Yeah, and she does quite often.
But this really changed your life, didn't it, in a certain way? Wasn't it sort of for you so illuminating about the people you come from?
Yeah, because up to that point, I grew up in Richmond, Virginia, a very southern town, old capital of the Confederacy. You've seen all the stuff with the statues and all that stuff all over the news. And but one thing that set us apart, and we were sort of, we weren't an intimate part of the Italian community in Richmond, which there is a vibrant one, because we were not raised Catholic. My grandparents left the faith when they came to the United States. They were farmers, and the tithing system over there was very onerous, and you had bad crop years, and the tithing system went 10, 20, 30, 40%. You had 4 bad years, you owe half your crop to the church. And so we were not raised Catholic, and that really set us apart from a lot of others. So I didn't have a lot of Italian American friends growing up. The neighborhood I lived in didn't have many, and I didn't have the church. I was raised as a Baptist. I'm one of the few Italian Americans raised as Baptist. And so by going back to Varga, it was like there was this disconnect in my life. There was like a wire in here and a wire in here. I knew I was Italian American, but I didn't have any context. My dad never spoke Italian, because back then the generation was, you learn English, you're American now, you're not going to speak another language. So there was a disconnect in my identity. And by going back to Varga and seeing a place and walking the pathways that my grandfather had walked, made that connection, and I felt completed in a way. It was like I'd been living, all those years is sort of only half formed. And that allowed me to have some context to my ancestry, and to see and meet people who, knew my family back then and had some, relationships with them. And I've kept in touch with quite a few of them. And you're right, Adri, it was a very powerful moment for me, and something I'd been missing my whole life.
Well, it explains the piece about which people have written in and asked. You're a master craftsman. There are people who write books that repeat the same book over and over again, and it's satisfying to some readers. You are not known for that. You are known for somebody who advances the story each time you write. Even when you write your sequels, you advance the story forward. And so there's an Italian old world work ethic in you that is not common. It's like, you know, and I always say this to people about you, you know, you have enough cheese. You really don't need to give yourself headaches, but it's the diligence and it's that Italian thing that that you want to get to be more excellent. You want to keep working to do better. Do you think that well, it's certainly in your family, do you think that you felt that more after you went to Italy? You went, hey, you know, I kind of get like how they make tapestries and how they paint and create.
Well, you definitely saw that over there. You saw that there are many master craftsmen over there, and you see it in the architecture, you see it in the books, you see it in the music, you see it in the food. And I remember my dad was, for a good part of his life, he worked for a trucking company, became foreman for a lot of his life. He was a mechanic. And I do remember one thing that always stuck with me. He would buy old car. We never bought a new car. We'd buy old cars and he would fix them up. And I learned how to work on cars just because of my dad. You know, we never ever took our car to an automobile repair place. I mean, who would do that? That's stupid, right? These days, nobody can work on cars. You know, it takes a computer and you have to, you know, it takes you like 11 and a half hours to remove a light bulb from one of the headlamps. It's impossible. But back then I would work on the cars with my dad. And I remember one time he bought an old Fiat, you know, an old Fiat. I was like, I didn't even know what a Fiat was. So he pulled it in the garage and I said, what is this? He goes, it's a Fiat. And he said, it's a foreign made car. And he never told me why he bought it. But now I you know, as the years went by, it sort of made more sense to me. And there was a sort of car where the doors open opposite, you know, the European way, not this way, they open this way. And inside it kind of smelled of mold and mildew in the old leather seats and stuff. But we fixed that car up and our family drove that car a lot. And my dad was particularly proud of that one. And, you know, I understand now why, but for me, the work ethic has always been there from both my dad's side and my mother's side.
Sure.
You know where my mom grew up and the hard scrabble life. And my mom grew up in a ridge, on the top of a mountain ridge in Southwest Virginia, where the Washington Post did a story on this place. In 2004, they finally brought electricity and running water to this ridge in Virginia, Southwest Virginia. Up until that time, you had to have your own power somehow, whether it was by coal fire or gas or whatever, but it wasn't going to be by electricity because there was none up there. And she grew up there in the 30s and 40s. So very hard scrabble life, but that's always been sort of beaten into me, that you make of your life what you will. If you work hard, typically good things happen. And the other thing about, you know, not writing the same story over and over again, in my master class, I tell people, look, if you want to have a long career as a writer, you have to constantly reinvent yourself and scare the hell out of yourself. If you ever get comfortable being a writer, go do something else for a living because you lost it. The edge is gone. Your creative spark is gone. All you're going to be doing is writing the same story over and over again and only changing the names. And what's the point of that? Is it all about money? If it's all about money, then, you know, go buy Bitcoin or, you know, go invest in Tesla, but don't write because it's not going to be any good. So every time I sit down to write a new story, I am terrified that I don't know what I'm doing, that I'm not going to bring magic again, that I'm not going to be able to write a story that anybody would want to read. But that fear is the best antidote to complacency. And the best advice I can tell to anybody is that wake up every day as a writer and be terrified that someone will finally figure out you have no idea what the hell you're doing. And if you wake up and you write with that behind you every day, it'll be good stuff.
Mm-hmm. It's so profound. You've helped me out of so many black holes, I can't even count them. But I noticed that there's a synergy between the Appalachian people, who are also, by the way, incredible craftsmen and hard workers and poor, and then your mountain in Italy. So you come from mountain people, really both sides.
I do. As my mom said, you know, when I was talking to my mom when I was writing the novel Wish You Well, and she was recounting to me in explicit detail events that happened to her 50, 60 years before. And I remarked to her, I said, you know, I have a hard time remembering where I was yesterday. So how do you remember that in such vivid detail? And her answer was very terse, but to the point. She goes, when you live like that, you never forget. She goes,
Wow.
We never bought anything. We made everything or we grew it. And if you couldn't make it or you couldn't grow it, we didn't have it. And in growing up like that, it's not a cliche, it's a specific identifying trait for you for the rest of your life. And she lived the rest of her life with sort of the mentality was if she couldn't make it herself or she couldn't grow it, then it didn't exist in her life. You know, I never known, my mom never went out to buy a car. My dad bought a car. My mom never did. She made her own dresses. She grew her own food, even though we lived in a town where she could go to the grocery store. But it was almost like if she gave up that ability, that she would give up an integral part of herself. And I get that as her son. And I like to keep things close to the vest. I like to keep in control of things. And I want to make sure that when it comes down to it, you know, I'm going to be able to deliver what I need to deliver. And people have always asked me, how come, you know, a lot of writers out there, big name writers are now, you know, writing, co-authoring books, and the other person's really writing the book and just putting a name on it. And I said, I could never write a book with someone else. You know, I don't play well with others when it comes to writing books, but for me, it would be like a betrayal of the art. And I would never want to do that. I have nothing against people who do. It's just not something I would ever be able to do because part of my identity is that that's what you're supposed to do, not palm it off to somebody else.
You also like to be by yourself and go in your office and work,
Yeah.
even though you work long hours and so on. But you're kind of an intro extrovert, because I've seen you like tear it up in front of big crowds, and yet you also have that other side of you that is you know. Now, to me, that's also Italian, because the bombastic person and then the quiet person, the fragile artist, it's married in one person. That is you.
Yeah, if I didn't have those two halves, I don't think I couldn't be whole at all. And we have some friends visiting down here in Florida, and we went out around and did some things today. I'm in the middle of writing books and stuff, and you know, Michelle said, she goes, I know you're distracted. I know you. I know you're living inside your head right now, and I know that's where you need to be. But she said, look, give me 2 hours. Just give me 2 hours and we'll go to this place and, you know, we can entertain the friends that are down here who I really like a lot. But sometimes no matter how much you want to be out there gregarious and talking and joking and all that stuff, and if your head is back in the pages, it's tough. So she's seen that. But Adriana, you're absolutely right. And I know you're the same way. I've seen you tear up crowds beyond belief. But when we're writing, that's when all that shit goes away.
It does, and it has to be quiet. I don't have anything. I saw where Colson Whitehead, which was a great interview, by the way, on 60 Minutes, where he said he's got this music playing. I would go out of my mind.
Yeah.
And he's a beautiful writer. I mean, no question.
Yes.
But everybody's different in that way. But you love that solace and that. And Michelle gets it. She gets it. My husband gets it too.
No.
He thinks it's weird when I talk to myself. Do you do that?
All the time. I mean, you know, I'll take a walk, I'll take a bike ride, I'll take a shower. You know, I just had to be at this inner peace where I have to, all the million things in my head are clicking back and forth and they're all wanting attention. I'm trying to figure out what the exact perfect configuration of all that is in my head. And that just takes a little bit of solitude. It takes a little bit of just, you know, allowing yourself to sort of like implode within yourself and getting as deep as you possibly can, because the story requires that. I mean, you can't write a novel that is worth reading if it wasn't, you know, at some level painful, hard, difficult, frustrating, and just agonizing to write. Because it's, look, you're birthing a child just on paper. But you have to bring together millions of details in exactly the right order. And if you miss one of them, the book sucks. I mean, talk about a little bit of pressure. But if you really love the craft, not only will you get to that level, you'll want to get to that level. You will be racing down the street in your head to get to that level, because you know that's where you need to be. That's where the magical elements come about. It's a tough place to get to, but yeah, you got to want to get there.
Mm-hmm. You know, a lot of Mary Higgins Clark, you know, she worked till the day really literally that she died.
Yeah.
I went out to New Jersey and did a communion breakfast with her, and she was in her 90s at that point, well turned out, beautiful. She came alive when she talked about her books or when she was signing them and she was talking to her readers. Okay, so she never retired. On the other hand, I had lunch with the great Judith Krantz, who blew in at age 50 after she raised her boys. She blew into the industry with Princess Daisy and all those books that were, at that time, they would do a mass market paperback, and they, you know, I don't think they were yours, David, but they were millions, okay? And then they made all those television movies, which, by the way, I want to plug the Wish You Well movie. It's one of the most beautiful movies. You'll love it. And then you have the Christmas Train. Oh, we'll go back to that in a second. And Absolute Power, everybody's seen them, but watch them again. So Judith Krantz had a different thing. I said to her when I met her, I said, Judith, just give it to me. Tell me how you did it and what I should do. And she said, you need to pick an age to get out. She said, I picked 70. And she said, thank God, my husband died when he was like 78. So I had 8 years, because when she was writing, she was like us. She was a 7-day-a-week thing. And she said, because what happens is, to her, she said this, she said, I had to stop that machine, because there was such a machine behind me that the expectations were always ramped up. And she said, and when I stopped, she said, I could appreciate it more than if I'd have kept going. So what's your plan? Because everybody's got a plan. Do you have a plan?
Just interrupt real quick, guys. I appreciate it. We definitely want to answer that question. We're getting really, really close to our timeline here. And I think there may be some questions from the viewers. And I did have one question as well, but go ahead, David.
Do it.
Yeah, my plan is I'm going to follow Mary Higgins Clark, because writing is such a part of me. If I stopped writing, then I think I would stop breathing. I don't know what else I would do with my life. It wouldn't be anything nearly as fulfilling as what I'm doing right now.
Good. Okay, let's go to the questions, Bob. You have
Justin, we got anything? You're on mute.
Absolutely, we do. So Rena Gilja was wondering, how do you find inspiration to write during the pandemic when you're stuck at home?
That's a great question. And I think the pandemic allowed me to write even longer and even harder. And I think part of it was because I wanted to get away from it. I just wanted to get away from it and tell stories that had nothing to do with the pandemic. You're not going to find any masks in my book. The book's coming out. Please, all of you, wear masks, though. Please, I admonish you, wear masks. But it allowed me, I think, to get to a place where I didn't have to travel anywhere. I didn't have to go do events. I didn't have to go on book tours. A lot of the stuff that I agreed to do, for charities and all that, I would do Zooms and other things trying to do it, but I didn't have to travel, be on a plane or a train somewhere. I could just sit in front of my pencils and my pads and my screen and just roll, and I would, literally sometimes write 20 hours a day. And it was amazing. I loved it. It was the most productive I've ever been.
Wow.
David, before we get to the next question, I think our audience, I want to just get to something that you talked about, fear before. Talk to us a little bit about, you went to law school and you were a practicing attorney, I believe. If you could just tell us a little bit about that and what you must have gone through jumping away from the legal career to trying to become an author. What was that like for you? And how did, was it just you didn't like the law, or you just had a bigger calling?
Well, I'd always wanted to be a writer. I couldn't make any money as a writer, when I was younger, so I needed to earn a living. So I thought, what do I like to do? I like to research, I like to write, I like to stand up and talk. Lawyers do all of those things. So I went to law school. I did well. I got a job in DC as a litigator. But really, the attributes of a writer and a lawyer are very much the same. The only arrows I had in my quiver were words. I would write my legal briefs. I had a trial record, as you know. It was the same set of facts the other side had. And so I had to argue a diametrically opposed view that they were arguing based on the same set of facts. And how do you do that? Well, you tell a story. And you embellish facts that help you. You sort of deflect facts that don't help you. You get up in front of a judge or a jury and you say, this is the story. This is the truth. This is what you should be listening to. This is the right result. I'm telling you a story. So, and I would work on cases for years at a time. So when somebody said, my God, it might take you 3-4 years to write a novel, I'm like, I spent that long on cases. So that was not, demoralizing for me. So it wasn't as hard of a transition because my days didn't change. The only thing that changed was I was writing stuff I wanted to write rather than what a client wanted me to write, or rather than what a partner wanted me to write. That was the big change for me. So look, the legal profession was great for me. It made me a far better business person, a far better author. My publishers tend to hate me because I know all the contracts. I renegotiated so many contracts because here's my mantra. Nobody should make more money off of a book than the person who created it. It's a simple mantra. and I think most authors are not there. We need to get there. But so I love being a lawyer. It wasn't that I hated being a lawyer. I really helped me being a better human being, and also helped me be a better writer.
Justin, do we have time for one more question?
Yeah, absolutely. So Carolyn Rears was wondering, and I know this is probably a loaded question for the author, but of all the series that you have written, do you have a favorite one?
The pat answer would be the one I'm working on right now is my favorite of all time. I think I always have a very much of a fondness for the Camel Club. They were the second series that I did. King and Maxwell was the first. I have to say that Amos Decker, my memory man, is a phenomenal series in my mind. I love writing him. So he would be right up there. And lastly, my Aloysius Archer, the second book is coming out in the spring, A Gambling Man. And I love him just because I'm writing about a time period while I was not alive, the 1940s and early 1950s. And it's just a fascinating series and allows me to explore another facet of writing I've never done before. So really, it's just, my favorite is the one really I'm focusing on right now. But, King and Maxwell, the Camel Club, Amos Decker, they're right up at the very top of my favorites.
Okay, Justin, maybe I don't know if we have one more quick one and then you want to sign us off?
Yeah, Miles, I don't know if you want to jump in.
Yeah, sure. I was wondering, so you do a lot of research for all of your books, right? And with that comes a lot of hands-on research. What's a memorable experience that you've had when you've been doing research for one of your novels? What's something that you comes to the forefront of your mind?
Going down to Fort Benning and training with the Army Rangers for 3 days and getting my ass kicked across the base for 3 days and having to go to a parachute jumping grounds. They wouldn't let me jump out of a plane because I wasn't actually in the Army, thank God. But I jumped off a tower there that was pretty damn high, and you're attached to this zip line thing. And the paratroopers down there were betting against me that I wasn't going to jump out of that tower, because when you jump out, you see nothing that's going to hold you up, And so when I finally got the courage, I jumped out. And the guy told me beforehand, when you jump out, jump as far away from the building as you can. And that way you won't drop as fast. He said, but keep your chin tightly tucked to your chest. Make sure it's cemented like this. I said, why is that important? He goes, if you don't, the cable you're attached to will come around and it'll slice your ear right off. So about 6 months later, I was at a book signing. A guy came up to me in the line. He had a baseball cap on, young, fit guy, short hair, puts a book down. And, hey, Mr. Baldacci, I heard you jumped at Fort Benning. I said, yeah, I did. He goes, yeah, me too. He said, I forgot to tuck. So he took his cap off, his ear gone, half of his ear is gone. So I remember I got up from the book signing. I went to the restroom. I threw up. But I'm a tough guy. So I came back and I finished that book signing. So that was my Fort Benning experience. The sniper range, getting rolled over in a Humvee until they spin you around like a top until you're like puking, and then they give an order to get out before they flood the Humvee. That was a memorable one. So yeah, the things we do, right?
Great.
Wow.
Incredible.
Adriana, thank you so much for bringing David to us. What an awesome to have two amazing folks like yourself. So proud we are as Italian Americans to have folks like you to represent us in such a positive way. And we can't thank you enough. We're very grateful. Justin, let's close it down.
Absolutely. So if you're interested in becoming a member of the Order of Sons and Daughters of Italy in America, you can head to OSIA.org. Click on the member tab and you can find the nearest local lodge or sign up as an at-large member. If you have any questions, email us at nationaloffice@osia.org and follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Pinterest.
Perfect.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys. Hey,
Thank you.
Thank you, David. Thanks, guys. Thank you.
Take care. Stay well, everybody.